I never thought that one phone call, one desperate situation, and one emerald green bridesmaid dress would completely shatter everything I thought I knew about myself. But here I am, sitting in front of this camera, hands still shaking a little even now, ready to tell you the story that I have never fully told anyone. Not my parents. Not my closest friends. Not even the person who was there that day and watched the whole thing happen with her own eyes. This is the story of the moment that cracked me open, the moment that made me realize there was an entire version of myself that I had been locking away in a dark room my whole life, pretending the room did not exist, pretending I had never even seen the door. But before I get to that moment, I need to take you back, because the story does not start at the wedding. It starts much, much earlier, in a place that most of you would never expect. I grew up in a medium-sized town where everybody knew everybody, and that kind of familiarity is both a gift and a cage. My father was the kind of man who coached Little League and fixed cars on weekends and believed with every fiber of his being that there was a right way and a wrong way to be a man. He never said it cruelly. He never sat me down and gave me speeches about it. He just lived it, and I absorbed it the way children absorb everything, silently and completely, without ever having the language to question it. My mother was warmer, softer, the kind of woman who made every room feel like home just by being in it. She had this incredible collection of scarves and jewelry, nothing extravagant, just beautiful things that she wore with a kind of easy grace that I always quietly admired. I used to watch her get ready in the mornings when I was small, sitting on the edge of her bed, watching her brush her hair and apply a little lipstick, and something in me was completely transfixed. Not in a way I understood. Just in a way that made me feel like I was watching something important, something that mattered in a way I could not name. I buried that feeling before I was old enough to have a real conversation about it. You learn quickly, in a town like mine, what you are allowed to feel and what you are supposed to keep to yourself. So I became very good at being the expected version of myself. I played sports, badly but enthusiastically. I made friends easily. I was funny, a little sarcastic, the kind of person people liked having around. On the outside, everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to look. But inside, there was always this quiet hum, this low-frequency feeling that I was performing a version of myself that had been written by someone else, and I was just good enough at the performance that nobody ever asked to see behind the curtain. Through high school and then college, I kept the performance going. I dated, I graduated, I got a job in marketing that was fine, genuinely fine, the kind of fine that is its own particular kind of emptiness. And through all of it, there were these small moments, these tiny cracks in the wall, where something else would peek through. I would catch my reflection in a shop window and think, for just a flash of a second, something that I would immediately slam a door on. I would scroll past something online and feel a pull that I would immediately redirect. I became very skilled at the art of not looking directly at the thing I was not looking at. And honestly, I thought I could keep doing that forever. I thought the wall was strong enough. I thought the performance was solid enough. I was wrong, and the place where I was wrong was a wedding in early September, in a little church decorated with white roses, where a moment happened that I did not plan for and could not control and could not take back. Her name is Maya. She has been my best friend since we were 11 years old, when she moved into the house 3 doors down from mine and knocked on my door asking if I wanted to see her hamster. We have been inseparable ever since in that effortless way that certain friendships just are, the kind where years can pass without daily contact and then you pick up exactly where you left off, because the connection runs deeper than proximity. When Maya got engaged to Daniel, I was genuinely thrilled for her. Daniel is a good man, steady and kind, the sort of person who makes you feel like everything is going to be all right just by being in the room. Their engagement party was one of the happiest nights I had seen in a long time, and when Maya asked me to be involved in the wedding, I said yes without a single hesitation. Now here is where things started to get complicated, and I need you to understand the exact sequence of events, because the timing of everything matters. Maya had 4 bridesmaids. Her sister Priya, her college roommate Chloe, her cousin Rena, and her childhood friend from before me, a woman named Sasha. The dresses had been chosen months in advance, this gorgeous deep emerald green with an off-shoulder neckline, flowing and elegant. Maya had incredible taste. About 6 weeks before the wedding, Sasha called Maya with what I can only describe as a cascading disaster of circumstances that meant she could not be at the wedding. I will not go into Sasha's personal details because they are not mine to share, but the situation was sudden, serious, and completely unavoidable. Maya was heartbroken. Not angry, just heartbroken, because she loved Sasha and because it upended everything she had carefully planned. That is when Maya called me. It was a Tuesday evening, I remember, because I was eating leftover pasta and watching something forgettable on television, and my phone lit up with her name and I answered immediately because I could hear something in even the way she said hello that told me this was not a casual call. She explained what had happened with Sasha, and then she went quiet for a moment, and then she said something that I did not understand at first. She said, "I have an idea, but you have to hear me out completely before you say anything." And something about the way she said it made my heart do this strange little stutter. The way it does when some part of you knows that what comes next is going to matter even before the words arrive. She explained it slowly, carefully, like she had been turning it over in her mind before calling me. The wedding party needed to be balanced for the ceremony and for the photographs. More than that, she said, Sasha's dress had already been altered and was finished, and they were the same size. I still did not understand where she was going. And then she said it. She said, "The dress fits you." I checked. "You and Sasha have almost identical measurements." I know this sounds absolutely insane, and I know you are going to say no, and I know this is a huge thing to ask, but you are my person, and I want you there beside me, and I want you there as a bridesmaid, and I think if we just try, it could work. I remember the exact feeling that moved through my body when she finished that sentence. It was not what you might expect. It was not immediate refusal. It was not embarrassment. It was something much stranger and much more unsettling. It was a kind of recognition, a tremor moving through something that had been very still for a very long time. I said absolutely not, of course. I said it quickly, maybe too quickly, and Maya did not push. She just said, "I understand, I just had to ask, I'm sorry, forget I said it." And we talked for a little longer about other things and then we hung up, and I sat in my apartment in the silence and I did not finish my pasta. I did not sleep that night. I mean that literally. I lay in the dark and I stared at the ceiling and I tried to think about something else and I could not. Not because the idea horrified me. That was what kept me awake. Because the idea did not horrify me at all, and the fact that it did not horrify me terrified me more than any horror could have. I kept playing out the scenario in my mind, not in a panicked way, but in this slow, curious way that I had never allowed myself before. I thought about the dress. I thought about standing beside Maya on one of the most important days of her life. I thought about what it would feel like to walk into that church in something beautiful and feminine and not be the odd one out and not be performing the expected version of myself, and the feeling that came with all of those thoughts was not dread. It was something dangerously close to longing. By 4 a.m, I had talked myself into a corner that I could not get out of. Because there was this voice, very quiet, that had been with me my entire life but that I had never once let speak at full volume, and that night in the dark it was asking me a question that I could not unhear. What if you want to do this? And under that question, even quieter, even more devastating, another one. What if this is part of who you are? I pushed both questions back down. I got up, I made coffee, I went through the motions of the next day at work, and I called Maya that evening and I told her I had reconsidered. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked if I was sure. I told her I was not sure of anything, but that I wanted to try. She did not make a big deal of it. She did not squeal or make it dramatic. She just said, "Okay, come over Saturday, and we will figure it out together." And just like that, the door that I had kept locked for my entire adult life was pushed open by exactly 1 inch, and the light that came through that 1 inch was something I had been starving for without ever admitting I was hungry. Saturday came. I drove to Maya's apartment with this wild mixture of feelings churning in my chest, excitement and terror and something I can only describe as vertigo, like the ground was tilting slightly under everything I thought I knew. Maya met me at the door with the kind of calm that only Maya can project, steady and warm, the kind of presence that makes things feel safe even when they are not small. She had the dress hanging on the back of her bedroom door, and seeing it in person, in that light, this rich deep emerald green against the white of her wall, Something happened in my chest that I am still not sure I have the right words for. It was just a dress. It was fabric and stitching and a color. But it felt like a question that had been waiting a very long time to be asked out loud. She handed it to me without ceremony and she said, "Bathroom is there, take your time, no pressure." And she meant it. That was the thing about Maya. She never had a hidden agenda with me. She was just doing what she had always done, which was loving me exactly as I was and trusting me to figure out what that meant. I took the dress into the bathroom and I stood there alone with it for a moment, holding it, and I thought, this is just fabric. This is just a moment. This does not have to mean anything. And then I thought, what if it means everything? And I put it on. I am going to try to describe this accurately, because I think it is important and because I have seen versions of this kind of moment described in ways that feel exaggerated or theatrical, and I want you to understand that what happened to me was neither of those things. It was quieter than that. More seismic. I got the dress on and I stood in front of the mirror in Maya's bathroom, and for a moment I just looked. Not with judgment. Not with analysis. I just looked. And the person looking back at me was not exactly what I expected, and not exactly what I feared, and was something else entirely that I had never had a word for. There was something right about the reflection. Not perfect. Not finished. Just unmistakably, undeniably, something close to right. And that feeling, that terrifying, extraordinary feeling of rightness, was the thing that broke the wall open. I stayed in there longer than I should have. Maya knocked gently after a while and asked if everything was okay, and I said yes, I was coming. I came out wearing the dress and her face did something complicated, something warm and surprised and careful all at once, and she said, very quietly, "It fits perfectly." And then she said, "How do you feel?" And I opened my mouth to say something normal, something deflecting and funny, the kind of thing I always said when the real answer was too large, and instead what came out was, "I feel like myself." And then I burst into tears, which was absolutely not the plan. What followed was one of those conversations that changes the entire map of a friendship. Maya sat with me on her bedroom floor, both of us not caring about the dress getting crumpled, and she listened in the way she has always listened, completely, without agenda, without the need to fix or solve or categorize. I told her things I had never said out loud. I told her about the wall, and the room behind it, and the years of keeping the performance going, and the small moments that had cracked through, and the night I could not sleep. I told her that I did not know what any of it meant, that I was 31 years old and I felt like I was just now meeting a part of myself that had been knocking on the inside of my chest for decades. I told her I was scared. She held my hand and she said, "You are one of the bravest people I have ever known, and being brave does not mean not being scared, it means doing the thing anyway." We spent the rest of that Saturday in a kind of suspended, extraordinary bubble. Maya did my makeup, gently, carefully, with a patience that I have never forgotten. She did not make it a big production. She explained everything as she went, casual and matter-of-fact, like she was teaching me something practical, which she was. She styled my hair. I have always had hair that was long enough to style if you knew what you were doing, and Maya knew what she was doing. And when she was done she turned me to face the mirror, and I sat there looking at the full picture, the dress, the makeup, the hair, and I did not see a costume. I did not see a joke. I did not see a performance. I saw something that felt painfully, beautifully close to an honest version of myself, and I sat with that for a long time while Maya sat beside me and did not say a word, because she understood that some moments do not need words. I stayed at her apartment until almost midnight. We talked about the wedding logistics, but we also just talked, the way we had always talked, easy and real, and the only thing that was different was that the thing I had always held back from the conversation was now sitting in the room with us, finally allowed to be there. When I left I changed back into my own clothes and I drove home, and the whole drive I kept thinking, who am I now? Not in a panicked way. Just in a genuinely open, genuinely wondering way, like a question that finally has permission to breathe. The next few weeks were a kind of private transformation that happened mostly in the quiet spaces of my own life. I started doing research, reading, listening to other people tell their stories, people who described experiences that rhymed with mine in ways that made me feel less like an anomaly and more like a person who had simply taken a very long detour to get to something that had been waiting. I am not going to put a specific label on my experience in this video, not because I am ashamed, but because I think the label is still something I am in conversation with, and I want to honor that honesty rather than paper over it with a tidy word. What I will say is that I began to understand that the version of myself I had been performing was not false exactly, but it was incomplete. There was more of me than I had been showing, to the world and to myself, and the dress had opened the door to that more. The wedding was on a Saturday in early September, as I said, and the week leading up to it was one of the most emotionally textured weeks of my life. Maya and I had worked out all the practical details quietly between us. Her other bridesmaids, Priya, Chloe, and Rena, knew the situation. Maya had spoken to each of them privately and with characteristic directness, explained that I would be filling in for Sasha, explained that this was something that mattered deeply and that she trusted them to be their best selves about it. She told me afterward that all three of them had responded with versions of course, whatever Maya needs, let us know how we can help. Chloe had even texted her separately to say she thought it was beautiful. I did not know any of this until after. In the moment I just had to trust that it would be okay, and trusting that things will be okay has never been my strongest skill. The morning of the wedding I woke up before my alarm, which is something that only happens when my brain is too activated to wait for permission to start the day. I lay there for a moment in the grey pre-dawn light and I took stock of what I was feeling. The expected things were there: nervousness, a kind of performance anxiety, a worry about whether I would get everything right, whether the makeup would work, whether I would feel ridiculous walking into that church, and whether anyone would stare or comment in a way that would make the day hard. But underneath all of that, running deeper and steadier, was something else. Anticipation. Real, genuine anticipation. The kind that comes from moving toward something rather than away from it. I had not felt that particular flavor of anticipation in a very long time, if I had ever felt it at all. I got to Maya's mother's house where the bridal party was getting ready by 8 in the morning. The house was already humming with that particular energy that wedding mornings have, music playing softly, the smell of coffee and hairspray, people in robes moving between rooms with the focused efficiency of people who have a very specific timeline to hit. Maya came to the door herself when I arrived and she hugged me for a long moment and she said, "I am so happy you are here." And I said, "I am happy I am here too." And I meant it more completely than I have meant almost anything. The getting ready process was its own kind of gift. Priya and Rena and Chloe folded me into the morning without a single moment of awkwardness that I could feel, which is either a testament to who they are as people or to the fact that when you are getting ready for a wedding there is simply too much logistical energy to waste on discomfort. The makeup artist worked on each of us in turn, and when she worked on me she did so with complete professional calm, asking about what I liked, suggesting things, making me feel like a person being cared for rather than a problem being managed. There is a particular vulnerability in sitting in a makeup chair, in having someone work on your face with focused attention, and I found that I did not want to escape it. I found that I wanted to be exactly there, exactly in that chair, exactly in that morning. When the dress went on, when all the pieces came together in that upstairs bedroom with the September light coming through the window and the sound of music drifting up from downstairs, I looked in the mirror and for just a moment I was alone with the reflection, and the reflection was calm. Not ecstatic. Not performing happiness for anyone. Just calm, in the way that things are calm when they are in their right place. I thought about 11-year-old me, watching my mother at her mirror, feeling something I could not name. I thought, it took you long enough to get here. And then Maya appeared in the doorway in her wedding dress and she was so breathtakingly beautiful that I forgot everything else entirely and just said, "Maya," and she laughed and said, "Do not make me cry, my makeup is done." Walking into that church was one of the hardest things I have ever done and one of the most important. I am not going to pretend it was not hard. There were people there who knew me, who had known me for years, people from Maya's extended family and Daniel's family who did not know me at all, and I walked down that aisle in an emerald green bridesmaid dress on a Tuesday bright September morning and I held my flowers and I held my head level and I breathed. There were some looks. Of course there were looks. But looks are just eyes moving. They cannot reach inside you and take anything unless you let them. And I had decided, somewhere in those weeks between Maya's apartment floor and this aisle, that I was not going to let them. The ceremony itself is something I will carry for the rest of my life. Watching Maya and Daniel make their promises to each other, standing there with Priya and Chloe and Rena, being part of the circle that held this moment, I felt something open in my chest that I think had been sealed for a very long time. There is something about witnessing a moment of complete honesty between two people, of watching someone say, "This is who I am, this is what I feel, this is my truth," that makes you hungry for the same kind of honesty in your own life. I stood there with my bouquet and the September sun coming through the stained glass, and I thought, I want to live like this. I want to stop performing and start showing up. There were photographs. There was a reception. There was dancing, which I was terrible at and which made everyone laugh in the best possible way. Daniel's uncle came and introduced himself and talked to me for 10 minutes about the town he grew up in, and it was just a conversation, just a normal human conversation, and nobody spontaneously combusted. Chloe found me during the cocktail hour and squeezed my arm and said, "You look stunning," and I said, "I cannot believe how not bad this is," and she laughed and said, "Why would it be bad?" And I did not have an answer for that, because standing there in that moment, I genuinely could not remember all the reasons I had constructed over the years for why it would be. The moment that I think about most, the one that lives in me the clearest, happened near the end of the night. The dancing had wound down and some people had started to leave, and I was standing by the edge of the venue near a window that looked out onto the garden, and Maya found me there, still in her dress, her hair a little softer from dancing, more beautiful than she had been all day because she was relaxed and happy and exactly where she was supposed to be. She stood beside me and we looked out at the garden for a moment without saying anything, and then she said, "So?" And I said, "So?" And she said, "How was today?" And I thought about it for a real moment, not a polite one, and then I said, "Today was the first day I felt like the whole me showed up somewhere." And Maya looked at me and her eyes were bright and she said, "That is the only thing I wanted for you." And I believed her. I drove home that night thinking about the whole me. Two words that had never fit together before in the context of my own life. I had been a partial person for so long that I had mistaken the partial person for the whole one. I had built such an effective performance of the expected self that I had started to think the performance was the reality. But the reality, the actual reality, was more. It was more complicated and more beautiful and more surprising than the performance, and what the dress had done, what Maya had done, what that morning in the September church had done, was simply given the more somewhere to stand. In the weeks and months after the wedding I began, slowly, carefully, to give the more other places to stand too. I started being honest with myself in small ways that accumulated into larger ones. I started wearing things I actually liked, nothing dramatic to begin with, just colors and cuts that I had always been drawn to but had told myself were off limits. I started having conversations with myself that I had previously been too frightened to have. I started looking directly at the thing I had always been not looking at, and I discovered that looking at it was not the disaster I had anticipated. It was actually a relief, the kind of relief that has a slight ache in it, the relief of finally putting down something heavy that you had been carrying for so long you forgot it was heavy. I came out to my sister first, about 3 months after the wedding. We were having dinner and I told her about that Saturday at Maya's, about putting on the dress and crying on the floor, about standing in the church and feeling whole, and she listened with a kind of quiet attention that told me she was taking it seriously, that she was honoring it. She said, "Does this mean you are going to start dressing differently?" And I said, "I do not know exactly what it means yet, I am still figuring it out, but it means that I was not being completely honest before, and I am trying to be more honest now." And she said, "I'm glad you told me. I'm glad you are figuring it out." And we ordered dessert and talked about other things, and it was simultaneously the most significant and the most ordinary dinner I have ever had. My parents were harder. My father especially. I am not going to pretend that went smoothly, because it did not. There were months of difficulty there, of conversations that did not go the way I hoped, of silences that felt like walls. I am not ready to tell the details of all of that yet. That is a story for another time when I have more distance from it. What I will tell you is that my parents are still in my life, and the conversation is ongoing, and I have chosen to believe that love is capable of expanding, that the people who raised me are capable of growing, even if that growth is slower and more painful than I would like. I am choosing hope there, not naivety, but genuine hope, because I know the people they are underneath the difficulty, and I believe those people will eventually find their way to me. What I can tell you is that my life now feels like mine in a way it never quite did before. I am not a completely different person. I am not transformed into someone unrecognizable. I still have the same laugh and the same sarcasm and the same tendency to eat pasta when I am not sure what else to do. But I am more myself. I am a fuller version, a more honest version, a version that takes up its actual space in the world rather than the contracted, performance-ready version that I maintained for so long. The wall is down. The room is open. And the person who lives in that room is someone I am still getting to know, still sitting with, still learning to love without conditions or apologies. Maya and Daniel just celebrated their first anniversary last month. I went to their dinner party and I wore something beautiful and I sat at their table and I laughed with the people I love and I felt the whole me present in the room and nobody combusted and nothing fell apart and the world kept turning exactly as it does, indifferent to and entirely accommodating of the fact that I had finally decided to show up in it honestly. I thought about the dress hanging on Maya's bedroom door that first Saturday, that question made of emerald green fabric, and I thought, you changed everything, you improbable beautiful thing. You asked me the question that I had spent 31 years refusing to hear, and you would not let me walk away without answering it. If you are someone watching this who is carrying a wall, who is running a performance, who lies awake at night with the quiet hum of a self that has not been allowed to speak, I am not going to stand here and tell you it is easy. I am not going to tell you that everyone in your life will respond with grace and warmth, because they might not, and you deserve honesty more than you deserve false comfort. What I will tell you is that the weight you are carrying, the weight of being a partial version of yourself in every room you walk into, is heavier than you know. You have been carrying it so long that the weight feels like your natural state. It is not. There is a version of you on the other side of that honesty that is lighter and fuller and more real than the version you have been showing the world, and that version deserves to exist, deserves to take up space, deserves to walk into a room and be whole. I do not know exactly what the next chapter of my life looks like. I am still writing it, still learning, still in the beautiful and terrifying process of becoming more of myself. But I know that I will never go back to the wall, to the room, to the performance that served its purpose and then outlived it. I know that the person I was before that September Saturday and the person I am now are separated by something that cannot be closed back up, something that should not be closed back up, something that I am grateful every single day was pried open by a phone call and a desperate situation and one extraordinarily beautiful emerald green bridesmaid dress. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope somewhere in it you found a piece of yours.